Welcome to the Promise Podcast, where we discuss how brands can deliver on their promise with a great customer experience and business impact. I'm your host, Harald Lamberts, and in each episode, I talk to business executives, thought leaders, and founders about how to achieve effective collaboration across departments, such as brand, marketing, product development, customer experience, and support, all with one goal in mind: a seamless customer journey with great business results. In today's episode, I'm delighted to welcome Andrew Garrihy, a seasoned CMO at world-leading brands, now helping other CMOs accelerate growth as the CMO coach. Welcome, Andrew.
Hi, Harold. It's great to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
For sure. It's been a long time, but we'll get to that in a minute. So before we dive in, we always ask every guest this question: what is a brand that truly delivers on its promise to you as a person, and why?
That's a really good question. I'm going to go with the one I use the most, and is become my absolute go-to for so many things. And it's probably really obvious, but it is the only brand that I think really delivers, and that is Amazon. I think probably about 80% of my household purchases go through Amazon now. And why is that? Because they just consistently deliver, right? And more importantly, they've nailed how to deliver an incredible experience when things go wrong, right? Mm-hmm. So my trust and confidence in Amazon is off the charts. Easy to find stuff, always gets delivered pretty much on time. And when stuff goes wrong, it's really easy to sort out. And they just get the basics done brilliantly every single time. So they're kind of my key. And I think that's why they hold so much of my purchasing wallet now, because I just trust them and it's consistent. And I know if it goes wrong, it's fixed.
Yeah, you got to trust. I mean, it's so much about a loyal customer relationship is on trust and knowing that you can, I mean, it's like a friend, yeah? Like you have a real relationship, you can trust them.
Exactly.
Sure.
Exactly. And they've got so many of my purchases to the point I'll find something else and then I'll go see if I can get it on Amazon, because I just know there's not going to be any worries with delivery, not going to be any worries with return. They just nailed it. They've just got it.
We'll get back to that because, of course, a lot of focus of marketeers is about activation and conversion, but the real loyalty is in delivering up to your promise, of course. So it's the post-purchase experience, like super important as well. Yeah, so
completely, especially now, right, when the value and the effectiveness of advertising is waning rapidly. It is about the experience and the longevity and referral business. It is so important. But this is one of my pet peeves. I get so frustrated with companies that just focus on hooking you.
Yep.
And the rest is a disaster. It's a disaster.
I know. We'll get to that. That's the core topic of this show. So we'll get on to that. Sure. Of course, as a customer experience apasionado, I'm all about that. So for sure. Of course. Okay, let me properly introduce you, Andrew. Okay, Andrew Garrihy has been a marketing professional for nearly 25 years. We worked together at Vodafone Group, but after that, he directed marketing teams at Samsung and Qualcomm, to then move on as a CMO at Huawei and Didi and OLX Autos. Now he's leveraging all that experience to coach CMOs and maximizing impact and growth as the CMO coach. Welcome to the Promise Podcast, Andrew.
Thank you. It's really is good to connect and good to talk about this topic. I'm quite passionate about this as a marketer.
Okay. Anything that you want to add to this, like short intro that I gave, like that defined your career or also your drive for being the CMO coach right now?
Yeah, I think what will I add? I think look, my career is defined by taking on big challenges. Right? I've never been one to kind of take on a small challenge. I have always been one to kind of bite off a lot more than I can chew and then having to chew like hell, usually to my own detriment. But that's also given me some incredible opportunities, like leading brand globally for Huawei and leading marketing internationally for Didi, the kind of Chinese Uber, et cetera. It's been amazing. And now the CMO coach is the same thing.
Yeah.
Through all of that, I learned so much about what not to do more than anything.
What works and what doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And now it also gave me taking those big risks gave me an opportunity to work internationally in places I never imagined. India, Indonesia, Latin America, China. And now sharing that knowledge with others is really valuable. Especially, I think the single most powerful thing I got is I now have a truly great appreciation in cultural differences, especially the difference between East and West.
Yeah.
When you bring that stuff together, oh my God, it's incredible what you can achieve. Yet here we are as a world kind of fragmenting rapidly. But I think generally for marketers and for experience, when we can borrow the best of both of those worlds, that's where the magic is.
And for global brand, I mean, if you're talking global brands, they are covering those geographies, yeah, so they also need to respect the cultural differences and market differences, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely,
for sure.
And yet many don't.
Oh, for sure, and that's true for many things, of course.
True.
All right. Okay. Maybe can you say a few words about your time as a marketing director and CMO at these global companies? And you alluded already a little bit to the cultural differences, but also what have some of your major learnings been in all those years for making a marketing department really effective and successful? Can you name a few?
Wow.
Like what are the, I mean, I know it is a big question, but I mean, what are some of the key factors that good, effective global marketing teams do?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, that is a big question, but I think it comes down to a couple of things. I have a framework for this. So if it's about high performing marketing teams, I have a framework that employs 5 C's. So first, it is about commonality, right? Commonality of language, commonality of behaviors, commonality of success, commonality of measures, and kind of commonality of vision. You've got to get those things aligned. The single biggest challenge for marketing teams is when you're talking different languages and you're measuring different things and you're in service of different visions.
Across departments, you mean? Across departments, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. And it happens so much. So the first one is commonality. The second one is culture, right? It doesn't matter what you put into place. If you don't have a strong, aligned core culture, then you've got a serious problem. The third one is communication, right? Great marketing teams are exceptionally good at communicating internally amongst divisions within marketing, but across the organization. Marketing is so broken today. It is so fragmented that successful marketers have to be amazing communicators, because marketing doesn't control much anymore. And to get things done, it has to have great influence in an organization, right? So they have to be the best communicators in the business. And if they're not, then you've got a problem.
As in a very clear proposition and focus and communicating that.
But also, the reality is in marketing, if you want to deliver a proposition to market or a brand promise, you've got to do that through the rest of the organization.
Right.
The bit you control is so tiny, right? Yep. If you can't sell a dream and a vision and motivate people you don't control with executive power, it's finished. Right. Yep. So yes, your communication as a marketer needs to be good, but your communication as a leader needs to be outstanding. Sure. And so do your people. And then the next one is kind of care. To be a really high performing team, you've got to drive hard, but you've got to care. And you've got to show real care and concern and support for your people. Because if you don't, you'll burn them. And I've been guilty of that. I've burned more great marketers than I wish to admit. But you've got to really care, because you can't have people performing at that level without giving them the right support. And then the last one, obviously, is coaching. That's been my biggest learning and why I started coaching. My last roles are all big big international roles, teams of 500, 600 people across 50 countries.
Yeah.
I quickly learned it's all about coaching. You've got to help people lift and coach them. And when you do that, the results are incredible. So that's kind of my 5 C's of high performance marketing teams. Very
Wonderful,
easy to say, very difficult to do.
I was going to say. So the thing that actually, we talk a lot about it, Sense, but also I in this podcast is, of course, the difficulty of having a great customer experience and customer journey across the departments is also the silos that you deal with. So, and I think you talked to this with the commonalities and the communication aspects as well, to say, okay, if we really want to drive this as a proposition, and we also really need to make sure that alignment and communication with the different, because otherwise you do end up with that marketing promise, which doesn't get delivered in all the other departments at all, and then you actually lose this trust of the customer that you said Amazon did so well. So I think the one thing that we share is really, with our customer journey management focus, and also what you say on the marketing aspect is really to have this more holistic shared understanding of the commonalities and also the communication around what you're really trying to achieve. So I really appreciate that. Marketing can play a super important role in that, because they're actually defining the offering, if things are well for the market and the customer base for the rest of the organization to deliver against. So I think that's very good to hear that you're, and of course, many companies that you coach, I'm sure, still have, a little bit to do on those 5 areas, I'm sure. Yeah?
A lot.
Okay.
Thankfully, a lot. Keeps me in business.
Yeah, that's good for your business. Okay. Any good examples of maybe that you've seen of those like cultural difference that you can highlight? You said Western and also Asian companies. What can you name just maybe an interesting example of what is so different?
Yeah, I'm going to give you an example from my time at Huawei. And I'll give you the example because this changed me. And it was also, I think, key to the success we achieved at Huawei. Well, before we got caught in a geopolitical storm. And I still use this today. So I still do a lot of work with Chinese companies, but I use this today even with non-Chinese companies because it's been so valuable. So I'll tell you a story. So I had just joined Huawei and my boss was a guy called Walter G. Young guy. I think he was a genius. I think he was like 35 or something. And he was the European CEO of Huawei. And I'd been there about 3 months and he called me in one day and he said, Andrew, I have to be honest, you're driving us insane. Oh, what?
Yeah.
You're driving us crazy. And I think we're probably driving you crazy. I'm like, well, funny you mention that because you are. And here was the crux of the matter. He's like, the thing is, Andrew, we know technology really well. Our tech is incredible. We don't understand marketing. We don't really understand branding. And here's the problem. You're really well trained in marketing. You're really well trained in branding. And you know how to do things and you know the process and you know the steps to follow and you know how to maximize success and maximize return. So it's amazing. But that takes you 3 months. And that's too long for us. We have a different approach. We like to test and learn and adapt and test and learn and adapt and test and learn and adapt. And for us, that gives us much more satisfaction because if we wait around for 3 months planning, that's just wrong. That's the wrong way to do it because the thing is, Andrew, we'll both get to the same point in 3 months. You'll launch a brilliant campaign. It'll be amazing. But we will have made all the mistakes and learned, and we'll have a whole portfolio of learnings about what worked and what didn't. And more importantly, we'll feel like we've been actually doing stuff, right? He's like, so that's the difference. And so that was transformational for me because then I started to integrate both. How can I integrate my discipline and my experience and our Western approach to marketing with this kind of agile, iterative approach of test and learn, test and learn? And that was incredible. Here's the other thing that was dramatic for me in that period was this idea of collective wisdom. So the other thing they used to do was they challenge everything to the last minute, right? You'll be 24 hours from a massive launch and they'll still be challenging stuff to change. You just drive me crazy. I'm like, we agreed this 4 weeks ago. Like, why are we still challenging? And I never forget, it's like, Andrew, the thing is, we don't believe that any one individual can hold all the answers. And so we believe it's our responsibility to challenge and to look at alternatives and to tear things apart right until the last minute, because we know that will make things better. So it's not us attacking you. It's us just trying to constantly improve the potential outcomes and look at all the alternatives. Again, when I stepped back and looked at that, that was transformational. So the rest of my time at Huawei was then, how do I bring those things together? And when you do that, that's incredible. I mean, we would launch 50 to 70 products a year, and we became the fastest growing brand in the world. And in fact, at the peak, within 2 years, we went from not being known to the number one smartphone in the world without even being in the US.
Yeah.
That's mind blowing. Now, we still got lots of things wrong and we still screwed up lots of things. But when you put those things together, what you can achieve is astounding.
It also shows that there's no single way of doing things. Yeah.
So exactly.
So was that an East and Western thing, or was it also a technology versus a non-technology cultural? Or how would you say? Is it, or a bit of both?
I think it's a bit of both, to be honest with you. I think it's a bit of both. I think also I think it is a bit East and West, because there are big cultural differences, right?
Sure.
I think that the major cultural difference that I've experienced through many companies I work with there is, and it's changing a bit now, but China is still all about progress. It's all about progress. Every generation wanting better than the next. It's really about progress and taking a bigger position in the world. The West was not so much about progress anymore, right? It was about different things. It was about standards of living and blah, 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 all these other things. So there's a bit of a disconnect, but I think that Eastern hunger for progress makes things a bit different, because we have slightly different values in the West, because we've had our period of great rapid progress. And, I see that still in places like India and Indonesia and even some parts of Latin America. That thirst for progress is driving different behaviors.
So when you say you combine those two things, is it more like you have a long-term strategy, but you allow a lot more room for experimentation and trying things out on your way to get there? Is that
absolutely. So I call it the kind of Chinese agile marketing is what I developed there, which is a couple of things. You still need to have a plan, right? You still absolutely need to have a plan, but your plan is very, very flexible. And the way you iterate is much faster and much more flexible, right? So that's kind of the key thing. And then the other thing that's really important is carving off a part of your budget for experimentation, right? And I used to talk to my team about, there is budget is never an issue. If the ideas are big enough and brave enough and bold enough, there will always be money. And there always was, right? There was always money for great ideas where people were brave enough to experiment. And so it was kind of, yes, you need a big plan. There's no question you need a longer term plan, but the way you execute needs to be much faster, much more iterative, much more agile. And you need to be willing to change as soon as you get learnings, right? You can't stick to the plan at all costs. And you need to create a culture and free up resources to experiment a lot. And so the execution is quite different.
Yeah, and you get more team engagement with that experimentation. So you kind of bring them along on this cultural and focus and as well with those iterations, I guess, instead of like a master plan from the top kind of thing.
Exactly, and that's also why the communication is so important. Again, because marketing controls so little of the total customer experience, right? Marketing doesn't really control product anymore. It doesn't control pricing. It doesn't control service. It doesn't control experience, design. But it has to lead for a vision of a brand or a vision of a product that we want to deliver. And so, again, this is where it gets challenging. You've got to get an entire organization aligned behind that kind of thinking when they've got their own.
That's an excellent bridge to my next question, because of course this podcast focuses on how brands can really deliver on their promise. And you say maybe in the past marketing was really in the FMCG world as well, like really driving everything, and then basically the rest was execution or delivery. And now, of course, it's a much more like a omni-channel or cross-departmental activity. So based on what you've done in those last 10, 15 years at all these global companies, what do you see there in terms of like to really deliver this entire customer journey end to end? How has that changed the role of marketing and still being effective of making sure that alignment is there instead of defining everything up front and then just execute towards more like this, almost like this continuous improvement modus across from customer service to marketing to branding to campaigning to online and digital agile developments that are also constantly evolving, like that asks for a lot more continuous alignment than putting something down at the beginning and then executing against it. Any learnings from that, like how the role of marketing is kind of like changed for that?
I think first I'd say this is one of the greatest challenges for marketing, right? And we certainly didn't get it right all the time. Sometimes we get it right, but not all the time, because there's some fundamental structural issues in most modern organizations, right? You have the customer experience split into very fragmented silos. You have competition for resources amongst those silos. You have different KPIs or success measures and remuneration, all of which is working against you, right? And which is why we have such terrible customer experiences in so many organizations, right? Because the service guy's got to cut costs, right? The finance guy's got to get greater margin. The sales guy's got to get more top line revenue, and the marketing guy's trying to dance amongst it with the brand
KPIs, basically.
Yeah, it's a disaster, right? So I don't think we ever got it right. But here's the things we did to try and improve. And I've used this at all the companies since, and I still use it with companies today. One of the things that Huawei was genius at, and I don't get me wrong, this didn't fix it, but this is one of the things I learned from Huawei, which it was genius. What they'll do, let's say I wanted to launch a product, right? So I'll give you an example. One of the breakthrough products that we launched in Europe and the world was a product called the P20, and it was the product that dramatically changed Huawei's position in the market. And what Huawei do is they formalize projects. So you create a project, you create a cross-functional team, you formalize it, and then you agree the bonus that team is going to get if they deliver the project. And these are big bonuses based on the team delivering that project successfully. And actually, in Huawei, you can make more money from team project bonuses than you can make in your salary. It's a genius model, because what happens is two things. People start leaning into these big projects that drive great change. They start wanting to be on the project, and they start taking shared ownership for the delivery of that project, because all those other barriers are gone, and there's one big incentive for the team to deliver that. And that's what Huawei did brilliantly, really good. And that's taught me a lot. I do that all the time, and I recommend.
And what are the incentives then? Because you could argue in the product you still have the marketing KPIs and the customer service KPI, but how did they actually like incentivize the group?
So as a project team, you'll agree what the objectives are. You have a project charter, you sign it off, but it's real monetary incentives. Like, it's serious money if you hit those objectives as a team. It's incredibly powerful. So that's kind of one thing. The other thing is in marketing. So when we ever did it, I had a big marketing operations division, and when we'd launch a product or do anything around brand, we would have a very strong process to take that to market that was incredibly cross-functional. I think we had 17 or 21 different work streams, and it was everything from customer research to pricing to service to product experience to the after sales experience to the return experience. Everything was mapped as a team. It wasn't just, the communications or the website. It was the entire experience. And that required some heavy, heavy, heavy lifting. But we had a big team dedicated, because that was critical to our success, right? Especially as a Chinese brand that wasn't very well known and certainly wasn't trusted.
Yeah.
If you didn't deliver on that promise, you weren't getting that business again. And we were spending a lot of money acquiring these customers. I couldn't afford to spend that money to keep acquiring new customers to replace all the ones that I was pissing.
Keep some, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And unfortunately, this is the biggest problem for marketers today, that marketers are still not investing enough time or effort in trying to get alignment across the organization to deliver the promise. Now, should it be marketing or should it be somebody else? That's a whole different discussion.
Well, I mean, not any department, I think, is totally responsible for that. I think it's more like, you need to organize the department in such a way that you're also collectively responsible for that, I guess, and then break it down so that the incentives add up instead of having competing incentives that don't align necessarily. And of course, that's not easy. But I really like your example of this project bonus, if you will, because then you immediately say, "Oh, guys, you guys are a team. You're a shared goal.
Yeah, exactly.
You need to win, basically.
Exactly.
And you need each other. And you can't do this alone. But whereas if your only bonus is your conversion percentage, then you're like, okay, I don't need those guys because I'm just going to focus on this. And that inherently works against, this kind of customer loyalty focus, if you will. So I think
exactly. And that again, that's why I like that model as well. I think that model was
sure.
It was genius. It was. I'm assuming when I first came across it, I'm like, that's weird. I'm just doing
like a shortcut.
Why do I? Yeah, it felt really structured, and also when the project's successful, it gets huge internal publicity, right? It's published and everyone's celebrating. I'm like, but they're just doing their job. But then when you get in it, now I get it. This brings incredible focus, and actually, you can make a lot of money. Right? And who knew? By doing the right thing by the customer, you can actually make a lot of money in the short term.
Yeah, and I mean, this company bonus feels like, it's so uncontrollable, and you're like,
exactly,
why? I mean, you don't really influence it. Whereas in a project team, you can really directly influence it, which is, of course, much more motivating in it.
Exactly, and also, for us, I might be a key leader in that, but I'm not the only leader in that.
Yeah,
there'd be 3 or 4 leaders. There'd be one corporate exec C-suite sponsor.
Yeah.
But then there's probably a leader from each key division making the decisions about what success looks like, who will do what, how we'll pay it, what the timeline is, et cetera, et cetera. It's a really smart model, and it works really well with that iterative approach, right? You do 10 big projects like that a year, you've completely changed the organization, right? And completely changed the brand, as opposed to trying to have a massive organizational transformation project and align KPIs and align org structures. It's just not going to happen, right? You're going to spend a ton of money on consultants and it's just not going to happen. Whereas transformation by actually doing and rewarding the right behaviors in real time makes a massive
and understanding the cause of effect, because I think we had examples of, we're working with several companies where customer service costs were really high, but so those guys are then being motivated to bring it down. But of course, the cause is happening somewhere else. So they were in this whole journey, there were things happening in marketing and digital and et cetera, leading up to people calling, of course. So actually, but as long as you don't understand which interactions are causing people to call, but then of course you can also not resolve them. But then because these organizations are so big and these teams are so big, the link is not really understood yet. And then if you just fix the customer service cost without knowing what's causing it, of course, you can't really address it. So, this is why we are really focusing on journey management and really getting companies to focus on the entire customer journey to say, okay, what we say here is leading to issues here or being delivered here. But then we face exactly the same issues as what you just said, is that if incentives or KPIs are not collectively owned, but each department has their own like focus, then there's not that sense of jointly having to fix that customer journey in the best possible way, because they're really like, okay, well, that's not really my job. My job is this thing here, and then that kind of works again. So we also noticed that governance and incentive and the KPIs and incentives that are being set are crucial for getting that kind of like journey team really to collaborate structurally on achieving those metrics jointly. But so sometimes the organizational setup is really working against this kind of like post-purchase experience efforts.
I completely. I've got a brilliant example of that when I was in Vodafone Australia. It was a brilliant example. So the company had grown from 7% to 21% market share, but was bleeding money. It wasn't making any money. And I just joined Vodafone. I was head of base management. And we had 60% churn. 60% churn. And the problem was sales were selling, they were inserting $2 SIM cards in broadsheet publications every weekend.
Oh, yeah.
So everyone was just getting these no-cost SIM cards with $10 of credit, burning through their credit and then churning, right?
Yeah.
And here I was sitting on a 60% churn problem. Sales were happy because they were hitting their sales targets. Yeah. Nothing was connecting in between, right? But this is why customer experience is still, I still don't know what the absolute solution is, right? Because unless you've got a leadership team and a CEO that really is pulling and stitching everything together, it's almost impossible to get the right investment because everyone's after they're just hitting their own individual KPIs.
Yeah.
It's
in my view, it's not actually customer experience, although we use the term for it a lot, of course, because the customer experience, of course, is really like how satisfied you are with the whole offering. But it's actually the cross-functional collaboration you need across the teams that, of course, will lead to a great customer experience. But it shouldn't be the responsibility solely of the customer experience team. I mean, this is really much more than customer experience. It's about alignment across departments to improve your service offering on a commercial level, on an operational level, and on a customer experience level for sure, but not customer experience level alone. I mean, I think there's efficiency gains, commercial gains, and customer value gains, but it really needs a transformational activity to initiate that way of working, and also to create the incentives and the KPIs that go with that. That's to kind of encourage that collaboration, and that's often not the case. It's like, oh, we want to do the journey, but the KPIs are still the same.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
We see a lot of companies experiment with it, but we still learning a lot as well there, because there is no blueprint yet for how to do this, and still you still have to kind of like work against those kind of established way of working that is more vertically set per functional area.
Yeah, I also love the challenge you just gave about, because it's not, I mean, it is experience, but actually I think experience sells it short. I think what we're talking about is
it's a point.
It's your podcast, delivering on the promise, right? How do you actually deliver on the promise? Because if you deliver on the promise, your business is going to be incredibly healthy and sustainable, right? If you do it in a financially responsible way.
Exactly.
But if you can deliver on the promise, you will have a much more sustainable business that's got greater longevity, because you'll just have much happier customers. So I think,
you mentioned Amazon in the beginning, Andrew. It's exactly what you said. Yeah, it's like after every purchase, I know I just can count on, and it's not, if they make one mistake, you're not immediately disloyal, because you're also, the fact that how they resolve it is still, it might even be better, make you more loyal than if they didn't have the issue in the first place. Yeah, sometimes.
Exactly.
So it's just about being able to rely on them, I guess, in this case.
Yeah. So what Howard, what are the best examples of structurally organizations doing to deliver on this promise? Because it's the structure is a big part of the challenge, right?
Yeah. I think what I see a lot is that, of course, it depends a bit if you are a big brand with very different propositions and portfolios, like, for example, Samsung that you worked for, and they do such a wide, they're not just mobile phones, they're like so many different products. So then they kind of treat them as separate companies, because there's no customer journey across all those areas. And we see the same, for example, with companies that are in healthcare or in consumer goods, for example. But within that target group, I think really to set this customer life cycle as the highest level of which you align, because that's a target group with a specific proposition, and then break it down to marketing, communication, conversion, onboarding, online, and customer service, for example. Because that is, like you said, actually, your Huawei case, that's a real team responsible for a specific proposition for a specific target group. And that's, to me, is a good way of breaking it up into teams, because they're collectively responsible for a proposition for a target group from activation to support. And that's where you need the collaboration. If you then have a completely different proposition for a completely different offering then they are almost like operating like a separate unit or company. So then you don't, and then the only overarching is the brand. Like it's the brand. I mean, I think you mentioned that. Like the brand commonalities, you still kind of want, that can be if that's something you can still align, say, hey, the brand experience across those units should be recognized, or you may be sub-brand. But I mean, if you want to live it on the same brand, then I guess there needs to be a kind of DNA experience across those. That's how we see it now. But it's also complicated. So the most successful companies that we see is they are starting small, because if you do this end to end from day one, there's so many change happening in the company that it's impossible to coach and organize constructively.
Well, that comes back to that iterative approach I talked about with the projects. I want to share an experience, because what you talked about with the overarching brand role, I think, is really important. So that was the case at Didi when I joined Didi. So Didi is, it's basically...
So for the audience, that's like an Uber of China,
It's basically the Chinese Uber. So it has, it's actually the number one ride-hailing company in the world, because it's number one in China, right? So when I joined it does ride-hailing, food delivery, and financial services. And when I joined in China, I think 90% of every trip done in China was done with Didi. It just gives you a sense of the scale. It's huge. But they had the same problem, because outside of China, they were a ride-hailing business, they were a food delivery business, and they're a financial services business. And how do you align a promise across such a diverse portfolio of businesses, two of which you don't control the experience, right? The restaurant controls it, the delivery drivers, the couriers, you don't control the experience. How do you align all of that and try and align an experience that you don't control, the cars or the couriers, etc.? And actually, the reason I mention that is because simple things make a big difference, right? So we aligned the overall brand promise around a core target audience, right? And our target audience was urban dwellers. So it was purely urban dwellers. And our overarching proposition was just trying to make every day a little better. That's all our promise was. If we could make every day just a little better, then we've done our job. The power of giving that direction to everybody inside the company, in every business unit, and our partners who controlled the experience, that alone was incredibly powerful, by just being clear on communication. And to your point, and the point we just made, you can't change everything all at once. If we could just do the little things to make every day just a tiny bit better, it would help. And that again started to transform the experience there, right? We decided to focus on safety, and then we decided to focus on quality of the delivery service for food, right? Just little things we could fix made a massive difference for those brands.
What I like there is it gives direction to you don't dictate everything. It gives direction to teams to make their own decisions. but it's also tangible enough, because what we often see is these brand directions are so abstract. Yeah? We've been at a telco together. It's like, yeah, our mission is to be the number one. I'm like, yeah, of course, that's everybody's mission. It doesn't tell anyone anything. I mean, really. So what is it that you want to be? Yeah, like so that people actually gives them guidance to make micro decisions in the daily work that add up to that better experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Exactly. I like that, because that's very. Because other than that, if you don't have that, then it's this brand PowerPoint that people ignore.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the key, right? That stuff needs to be so easy to remember, and it needs to be actionable, right?
100%.
And that's the key. But again, I raise that because I think it's this iterative, empowering people in the organization to make small iterative changes in service of this
and trust them to it. Yeah,
exactly,
with the right guidance. Instead of dictating everything. So I think that's also what we aim for with journey management. Is like, okay, the journey management kind of brings the holistic perspective, and then these kind of things, brand guidelines, for example, or a brand mission, can really help give it direction, because you also want to differentiate, of course. Otherwise, your journey would maybe be exactly the same as your competition. So there's, of course, also like a brand experience element to it that you can really drive to create that personal connection and loyalty with the customer base. So you have been in roles that are kind of like marketing and brand hybrids, right? Or not?
Yeah.
So of course, there's always like the very close link to what you try to be and how it translates to your offering, I guess.
Yeah, completely.
Has that been very different in your roles, like how marketing and brand have been split, or is that usually quite common?
I've been lucky because I've usually only taken roles where I've had both, where I've had control of the brand and control of marketing. But I'll give you an example. When I first joined DD was a bit similar. So I had brand and marketing, but I didn't have control of performance marketing. And that was a disaster. Because performance marketers just wanted to do bottom of the funnel, and they just wanted to do off. And then you're trying to deliver a brand promise. You're trying to get a certain type of customer. You're trying, for all the reasons about longevity and brand. That was a disaster. Now, in the end, we found a way to make it work. Right? And what was worse, a lot of the performance marketing was done in China for international markets. You had people who were, kind of worldly, but they'd never lived or worked outside of China, and they were trying to do performance marketing ads for, Egypt or South Africa or Brazil or Mexico or London, right? It just doesn't translate. The offers.
Well, if you're setting the strategy for marketing and the plan, but you don't control all the micro interactions that go out, then that's really hard to control, is it?
Yeah. So that's probably the only time I've had that, or I didn't have full control of both, and that was not good. That was not good because it makes it difficult to control the end-to-end experience.
Definitely something you wouldn't advise any of your CMOs that you're coaching. Then I guess
no, because I think the CMOs now. So this brings me to this is why I'm so interested in your topic. Is when I coach CMOs now, a big part of what we do is what sort of a CMO do you want to be? Because brand's part of it, but actually I believe the role of the CMO now is to be. They should be the customer champion now. They should be closer to the customer than anybody else because they have the understanding. They have a lot of the data. They should be the voice of the customer wherever they can, and they should understand that, and they should be closer to anything. And if you look at the brands that are growing 10x right now, it's those brands that are really, really close to their customer. There's Gymshark's a great example, right? They built themselves from a community first approach, and there's a couple others so close to their customer. Amazing. That's what marketing should be. And that's why CMOs, I think, need to get closer and closer and closer to this. But it's really difficult, right? I was lucky when I was at Huawei. I was given we had one of our global CMOs decided existing customer experience was above all else the number one priority. And so then they set about creating customer experience directors in every single country and every single team. And then in Europe, the responsibility was given to marketing. So those customer experience directors were all given to me. I had no idea what I was doing. And actually trying to get the whole organization aligned and trying to build a customer experience kind of function was incredibly difficult. Like, how do you manage it? How do you prioritize it? How do you reward it? How do you get people to invest?
Yeah.
And then you get other divisions, products saying, well, who are you to tell me what I should be doing? This is it's really bloody hard, right? It's not easy. And we don't get training as marketers as how to do that. So,
yeah, I mean, it's hard because all departments influence the customer experience, and because they all do things, and that makes it super interesting, but also very complicated because it requires a lot of alignment and agreed way of working across. You can't just do your own thing and be good at it, because all those things that you just mentioned as well influence that experience. So it needs orchestration, in that sense, and a well thought out through. Well, wonderful. Thanks. This is very interesting. But we're getting to the end of our time slot here. But Andrew, who should be a next guest that we should really invite? Like now that you've gone through this, like who would be a really good guest to talk about this as well?
Yeah. So I have got the perfect person. So I don't know how to pronounce her name, but she is the chief marketing officer of the beauty brand called Elf. Her name's Corey Machisoto. I haven't pronounced her, so I apologize. But she is incredible. You should definitely have a chat with her, because she talks a lot about how. So Elf its growth is outstripping the biggest beauty brands in the world. I think it's consistently for the last 7 years is like 30% year on year. It's incredible. And when you listen to her about their secret for success, she talks about the proximity, the distance from the C-suite to the customer. The greater the distance, the lower the growth. The lower the distance, the greater the growth. And then you listen to her take on how they use the community to drive everything, which is experience. I think that's the future. And that just listening to her is
amazing.
If you can get her, talk to her, because I think she's.
It's a great. I've never heard it, but it's a great metaphor, because it's actually a good indication of how much you are in touch with your customers. Yeah, so
exactly.
like the more levels are in between, the more it dilutes it.
Exactly.
It's a great way.
I definitely talk to her, because she's got a brilliant view, and I think that's the future, by the way, because
wonderful.
The closer C-suite can get to the customer, then you can deliver the promise without too many problems, right?
Yeah, and I think also listening to all of your examples, I think CMOs and marketing departments, of course, have been around for ages. And in the past, it was like FMCG goods and like in boxes that we sell and stuff. They have been made years before, and then marketing really had to sell it, basically. Whereas now, it's not that serial. It's like much more continuous adaptation of your offering. So the focus must go away from rolling out something to constantly improving something, and that's a very different dynamic that is required in an organization to kind of drive that. It sounds like when I listen to all your stories that's definitely something that is happening at the moment. So, all right, any final advice that you want to give to the audience on marketing or in general around how can they, improve their day a little bit every day in their work?
How can they improve their day? Wow.
Or their work.
Do you know this sounds cliche, but I genuinely believe as marketers, the closer we get, the more interactions we have with our customer, our days just get better, because talking to your customer can cut through 90% of meetings. It can cut through months of research just by talking to your customers. I'll give you one quick example. I remember I was with Vodafone Australia. Apple had just launched. We didn't have the iPhone. Our churn in the premium tier was off the charts. We didn't know what to do. And the entire leadership team spent one night just calling customers saying, why did you leave? By the following morning, we had changed our business dramatically because the entire leadership team knew what the problem was and what we had to do to fix it straight away. That probably saved us months by getting a research agent. Just staying close to the customer will make your life much easier.
That's interesting because that extreme urgency make it straight to the core. Like,
exactly.
Something you should just do all the time, kind of.
Exactly. And you do it, you cut off heaps of problems and heaps of frustration.
Yeah.
So
wonderful. Love that example, Andrew. Thank you so much. That's a great way to end this episode.
Perfect.
Thanks for being on the show.
Great pleasure.
Cheers. So that was another episode of the Promise Podcast, where we discuss effective ways for brands to deliver on their promise with a great customer experience and business impact. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to like, subscribe, or leave a review. Check haroldlammers.com for more great content. Hope to see you again in the next episode. Until then, keep pushing to deliver on the promise.